This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Our guest is Laura Doud. She is the auditor for the city of Long Beach, and we're going to be speaking about some audits that she has conducted, hopefully bringing in more revenue for the city of Long Beach, which faces fiscal challenges. Before we talk about the audits, I want to talk about you and what is the role of the city auditor, an elected position in Long Beach.
Yes, thank you.
Please.
The city auditor is the elected steward over the taxpayer revenues. And so we want to make sure that the revenues are being spent wisely and responsibly for the benefit of the taxpayers. So really to ensure that their taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately.
And also collected appropriately.
Yes, that's right.
What you have found in a couple of recent audits is that fines, for example, are not being paid to the tune of $18 million.
Yes.
That's a lot of money for any city, even a city as large as Long Beach. So let's talk about your powerful audit dealing with parking fees, parking fines.
Yes, sure. We audited the city's uncollected revenue and parking citations. We found out there were $18 million outstanding. We initially recommended a booting program. The city of Long Beach did not have a booting program, so we recommended those serial offenders with 5 or more outstanding parking tickets to be booted. And it was a better way to collect revenue quicker besides the towing.
And what's interesting is a follow-up audit determined that the booting program was not successful, which really surprised me, Auditor. Why?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because initially we found this uncollected money. We recommended booting. We came back a couple years later and found out it wasn't working. So we drilled down deeper and we found out the main reason why it wasn't working is because the software system that tracks the parking tickets was out of date.
Oh my.
So it was bogged down.
Such a common story with government. I hate hearing that.
But yes, the software system didn't have a feature that eliminated old data, so it was getting bogged down with all this old data. As you know, vehicle registration information changes quickly. People get new cars, they move, and so forth.
So you have recommended that a new computer software system be put in place?
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have the funds? How long will it take?
Yes, thank you. We believe, and our recommendation is for the city to make an investment up front to ensure that we can go after this money quickly, that it will pay for itself quickly through the revenue, the additional revenue that will be generated. So the city council did approve it.
They did?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's an estimated between $500,000 to $1 million.
And it's worth it?
Yes, it is.
In your mind,
yes,
Madam Auditor?
Yes. And this will help generate revenue quickly, help us track it appropriately as well.
When do we think that this system will be live?
The Department of Financial Management is working on it now. They think within 6 months to a year.
I also want to ask about another issue which really surprised me. So if you get a ticket, a parking ticket, and you don't pay it, that can then go to the DMV.
Yes.
And then the DMV can put a suspension on your vehicle registration for 2 years. It's only after that that the city can go to a debt collector?
Well, interesting. That's a very good question. Yes,
to me.
I know, and that's the point of our audit. We said we should be much more aggressive in our collection efforts all the way through the process. We shouldn't have to wait for the DMV to give us the green light. We can continue our collection efforts.
So there's not a law in place which says you have to wait for the DMV.
No,
you can go to
oh yeah, absolutely. We as a city don't even have to go to a debt collector. We could be making calls. We could be sending letters. We could be much more aggressive. But you're right. The DMV has the power to place a hold on your registration if you don't pay your tickets.
But you can still go to a debt collector prior to suspension, during suspension, after suspension.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to a second audit you recently announced, quite recently in fact, and that deals with your Parks, Recreation, and Marine Department. Long Beach, beautiful, has lots of great parks and marine activities, but unfortunately, there are some issues with financial management.
Yes, thank you. And our Parks and Recreation Department is a wonderful program. They provide great services and programs for our youth, for the people of the community. They're wonderful, award-winning, and so forth.
Amen.
Okay, thank you. But what hasn't kept up is the administrative structure on handling the cash and the finances. It's a very decentralized system. There are 34 different collection sites throughout the city. As you know, there are many people working in those cash collection processes that are recreation specialists, not
Right.
cash handling.
And I understand that a lot of them are still operating the books as if it was 1973. They're doing it manually.
Yes, exactly. And we shouldn't.
No.
Why in this day and age are we
Right.
doing this? There is technology available for us to do this electronically. We're doing by hand what could be done electronically, so we need to be much more.
And so the uncollected fees, not quite $1 million, is that right? Or is it actually, oh no, it's over $6 million?
No.
Explain.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The city collects approximately $6 million
That's what it is.
annually from our Parks and
Got
Rec
it.
services. Because we've tracked things manually and not through the system, we don't know exactly how much is outstanding. We're representing in our report approximately $500,000.
And what's interesting about this is you found that people who weren't paying their park fees, which presumably are not a lot of money, they're still allowed to sign up for the next season,
Yes.
which doesn't seem fair.
No, that's right. But that's a consequence of not tracking this properly, because these sports leagues will continue to play without paying, and nobody's tracking it, so they continue to pay and continue to
Right.
continue to play without paying.
Right, exactly.
And there's no consequence.
There is pay
to
to
them.
play, yeah.
That's right.
So my question is, are you recommending that the entire system be automated?
Yes. Yes.
And is there funding to do that?
Yes, and thank you. In this particular
Right.
case, the Parks and Recs, they do have an automated system. They're just not using it to its capacity.
I gotta tell you, I mean, if I were you, I'd be really frustrated. I mean, you're a better person than I am, because I read these reports and I just think, come on, people. Because
Well-
what they're doing is, it plays right into the narrative that government isn't efficient and effective. And I really believe there are some elements of government that are efficient and effective. But when you
Yes.
see this, I mean,
Right.
forgive me, it's my word,
No.
stupidity.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, that's true. And there's no separation of duties. The same person is collecting the cash, recording the cash, and depositing the cash. And that is just a huge red flag
Right.
for abuse and fraud and waste.
I have spoken with the controller of the city of Los Angeles, Wendy Gruhl, who essentially it's the same role as you. Your titles are slightly
Yes.
different, but the same
Yeah.
role as you. And what amazed me is when she told me that she'll conduct these very grand audits, and then she passes it to the city council, and they do with it as they may. Wendy Gruhl, Laura Doud, you don't have any authority per se to enforce the audit, the recommendations of the audit.
Well, thank you. We do our best. All of our recommendations state to the council. We request the council to request the department to implement these recommendations and then come back 6 months later with their status report.
Does the city council listen to you? I mean, in the most basic
Yes.
terms, do they take your audits and say, okay, we're going to do what she recommends?
Yes, on the 2 audits we've talked about today, absolutely.
Really?
The council agreed, they approved it, they recommended it to the city manager, and the city manager's department agreed with all of our recommendations 100% across the board.
Historically, have they?
Not always,
Okay.
but majority they have.
And
yes.
what I'm wondering is, you've trained me, you've taught me that there are only 4 elected auditors in the state of California.
Yes.
Is the fact that you are elected, does it give you more of a bully pulpit? And so as a result, I mean, look, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if you'd be here if you weren't elected in my chair, because
Yes,
you
right.
know, there's
Thank
something
you.
about an elected official. So does that really give you the imprimatur to pound the pavement? And
Yes, it does. I'm a representative of the taxpayers, and it's my job to make sure
Right.
their dollars are spent appropriately, being collected appropriately, and that we're working smart. In this day and age, that we use technology, we use all the available resources we have to work as efficiently as we can.
Thank you for working smart, because I believe government can work,
Yes.
and you are making sure that it does work efficiently and effectively. We have been
Yes.
speaking with Laura Doud. She is the city auditor for the city of Long Beach. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with Robert Garcia. Mr. Garcia is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. Yes, this is Robert Garcia. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. You also can see he is Latino. He's also a gay man, and so a lot of interesting issues surrounding both the gay community and the Latino community going on right now. I want to speak with you first about President Obama's announcement that he is in support of gay marriage. That is quite a statement from the President of the United States.
Well, not just quite a statement, but really historic, actually. I mean, the first time a sitting president has come out in favor of gay marriage, very publicly in an interview. I think certainly it was the right thing to do. I think not just for the gay community, but I think for the country. I think the LGBT issue is really a civil rights issue. I think it's an issue that everyone cares about, and it was very big of him to do so.
And it's interesting because before 1968, certain states could keep intermarriage illegal. That was the Loving case. I used to be a lawyer. And he is from an interracial relationship. So in some ways, it kind of makes sense that he would take this step, although I want to know from you, do you think it was too long delayed?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think everyone would have loved for him to come out with that sooner, but at the end of the day, he's in an election year. This was certainly, it's a political risk. It's not one that as a political person, I don't know if that'd be the one advice you'd give him, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. At the end of the day, he talked about him evolving his position. I think we trust him on that. I think that he's been talking about the issue. He's done more for LGBT rights as a sitting president than all the other presidents combined.
Even President Clinton?
Absolutely. I mean, he has appointed more openly gay appointees to his administration than all of the presidents combined. He worked on the repeal, obviously, of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Which was stunning. I never expected that to happen.
Amazing. I mean, and that's something that President Clinton, really pushed. And so,
well, did he push it, or was he forced to push it?
Sure, but I mean, at the end of the day, he compromised on it. And I think that when you look at President Obama's full record, coming out in favor of gay marriage, eliminating Don't Ask, Don't Tell, appointing more LGBT appointments than any other president in history combined, and his other support for anti-discrimination laws, I think you've got a you've got a great president on this issue.
That being said, he did say that he believes the issue should be left to the states. We know recently North Carolina voted overwhelmingly to outlaw gay marriage. If it is a right, shouldn't this be a federal right? I mean, shouldn't he have said, arguably, this should be the law in all 50 states?
Well, I think clearly, yes. I mean, I certainly think it's a federal right. And I think that a lot of us are hoping that that part of his position is still evolving. And so I think that what we're going to see from the president is you're going to see him talking about this more. You're going to see this probably go through the election. And if he is reelected, I think you'll see him be a little bit more even active in that case.
I do want you to dig deep if you can. And I know that you're an elected official, you're well-spoken, you're very sincere and upright, you got a blazer on, but do dig deep and talk to us about the emotion of this. For you, I understand you have a partner, you're not married, you can't be. I mean, how was it for you? I was actually here when I saw the tweet that said that he had come out in favor of gay marriage.
Well, it was very emotional. I mean, I think at the end of the day, for those of us that are, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, part of this community, it's a very important kind of issue for us. I mean, it's who we are as people. And I think that when we heard the president say that, it was such an affirmation. It's such a way for us to connect to really the leader of the free world, who's essentially saying, I support your right to be in a relationship with the person that you love and care about.
I also want to talk to you about an issue that really applies to you quite directly, and but for the forward-thinking nature of your parents, you could be in the case that I'm about to describe, and that is you came to this country as a 5-year-old from Peru.
Correct.
Your parents went through tremendous efforts to get your citizenship, and you received your citizenship. There are many children who come to this country with their parents, and their parents don't go through that process. And when it's time for them to get to college, they can't get financial aid. Right. Oftentimes they can't get in because of it. And there have been attempts to pass laws known as the DREAM Act that would change that. Right. In California, we have a DREAM Act, so undocumented are applicable for both private and public scholarships. There's no discrimination based upon immigration status for admissions to California schools, but it's not federal.
Right. You're touching on two very important issues. I mean, obviously gay rights, civil rights, and immigration, which are two very hot topics here right now in the U.S. For me personally, coming here as an immigrant with my family who are all immigrants, trying to become U.S. citizens, it's a very, very difficult process.
Tell us. I mean, you told me what happened. 4 in the morning?
Oh, I mean, listen, it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. I mean, as a young kid, having to get up, you're waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning, you and your entire family are getting in line at the INS office, you're being told when you get to the front of the line, you brought the wrong paperwork, you're going back, you're making an appointment 2 months later, you don't have anyone to guide you, it's very confusing, most things are in English only, we all spoke Spanish only, and so, becoming an American, a U.S. citizen, is a very, very difficult process. One that I appreciate very much. I mean, the day I became a U.S. citizen, I always say it's the best day of my life.
How old were you?
I was 19.
So it took that long. You got here at 5.
Right.
You had to wait to become an adult.
Absolutely.
It took 14 years.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes a long time.
But let me ask you this element. So here we in California have the DREAM Act. And so these students can go to college, they can get degrees, they can get financial aid. But the challenge is, once they graduate, they can't get a job.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, is it worth even having a state DREAM Act if they can't be employed?
Well, I think
under federal law.
Well, I think the state DREAM Act, which I support, and actually the Long Beach City Council came out in support of it as well, is obviously was a step in the right direction. I think the bigger question is what we do at a federal level, because as we know, immigration is really a federal issue. And we've had the federal DREAM Act, which is obviously different, being debated.
But it went down.
It went down, unfortunately, and I think a lot of us are hopeful that it comes back. And I think that the DREAM Act is the right kind of first step in looking at our bigger immigration policy. You know, in the immigration discussion, I think there's 3 areas of debate, and I think all 3 are important. One is border security, you know, making sure the border is secure. And I think a lot of us as Latinos, we support that. I mean, I think you've seen the border become more secure. I think President Bush started that, and President Obama
There's
has
been
done
more
the same.
deportations under President Obama than President Bush's first 2 terms.
Correct.
Or only 2 terms.
Correct. And I think if you ask the Obama administration, they would say that a lot of these are criminals, people that have broken the law, they've gotten tougher on them, and we should get tougher on people that break the law. If you break the law in the United States and you're undocumented, you need to go back to the country you came from.
I do want to go back to this issue because it is troublesome to me. And that, again, is we are giving these students the right to graduate from college with financial aid, and they can't work.
Right.
Is it a waste of taxpayer dollars?
Absolutely. And I think that's why what we've got to do is work on issues like the Federal DREAM Act. What we need to do is look particularly at our youth. And I think we start with the youth. You say, if you're a young person and you either A, served in the military, or if B, you went to college and you got a degree, you know, you received some type of degree, you went to Cal State Long Beach, you went to USC, you went somewhere and you graduated, I think those students and that youth, they need to be on a clear track and path to citizenship.
Okay, so I'm sure that Senators Feinstein and Boxer will agree with you.
Right.
They're from California.
Right.
But you know, they're but 2 of 100 senators.
Right.
Where do we go from here? I mean, we couldn't get it through. I'm not necessarily a supporter or an opponent. I'm just saying the supporters of it couldn't get it through at a time when there were many more Democrats in both the Senate and the House.
Well, I think 2 things are on the side of the DREAM Act. I think the first is that it was a fairly close vote. I mean, we're talking, I mean, certainly there's a few,
close.
You know, we had a few senators difference, so that's a good sign. And I think secondly, you just got to look at demographics and the way this country is going. I think the Latino population is booming in the United States, not just here in California.
Where do the Republican Latinos come down on this? Are they voting in favor of the DREAM Act?
I think most
in the Congress?
Most Latinos, I mean, those that are in the Congress, are very few Republican Latinos in the Congress, but those Latinos that are Republican, that are out there in the population, most of them are in favor of reasonable immigration reform. And no one's talking about amnesty, no one's talking about...
What about Latinos on gay marriage?
Well, you'll find that all the latest polling shows that 54% of Latinos generally are in favor of gay marriage. So
what about older Latinos?
Well, older Latinos are just like older whites.
That's true.
Or older African Americans.
As we conclude, I understand that Long Beach is going to be honoring one of the heroes of the gay movement, and really the heroes of the state of California, and that is Harvey Milk.
Right. Long Beach actually is breaking ground on the first park in the country named after Harvey Milk.
Not even in San Francisco?
Nope, there's a Harvey Milk Plaza.
And tell us who he was briefly.
I mean, Harvey Milk was a civil rights leader, one of the really the first openly LGBT elected official, was a county supervisor in San Francisco, was assassinated, and actually that started a chain of events.
And assassinated with the mayor, George Moscone, not a gay man. And his assassination had nothing to do with his gay...
Correct. But that actually led to Dianne Feinstein becoming mayor and then being elected to the U.S. Senate. So.
Robert Garcia, thank you so much for joining us and for opening up your heart on this issue,
Absolutely.
on these issues. It's not easy.
No,
it's not
thank
easy.
you.
Okay, his name is Robert Garcia. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with James Johnson, also a member of the Long Beach City Council. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to another edition of Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's my pleasure to introduce you to another member of the Long Beach City Council. His name is James Johnson. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
When I think about city councils, I think in a lot of ways their goal, their purpose, their mission, lifestyle issues, making sure the potholes are filled, making sure the street lights are operating properly. And I think you have the same philosophy.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
It's about looking at core services. And I think one conversation governments are having today is what are the core services of any level of government?
Right.
I think at the city council level it is public safety, infrastructure such as streets and sidewalks, and programs such as libraries and parks. That's what cities are here for, and that's what we need to keep focusing on doing.
And I want to talk about the infrastructure. I live in the city of Los Angeles, and I have a beautiful big tree in front of my house, but the roots are coming up, and it is causing major displacement of the sidewalk. Literally, it's buckling. Now, I remember maybe 5-6 years ago, Los Angeles had a program called 50-50. And what that program was is if the homeowner agreed to pay 50% of the cost, the city would pay the other 50%, and you'd go to the front of the line. Los Angeles has dumped that program, and they're not even repairing sidewalks today.
Right.
What about Long Beach?
Well, yeah, right now in Los Angeles the line is there is no line because they've stopped doing all sidewalk repairs. In Long Beach we have a couple programs. One is we have our normal sidewalk work. You call your council office, we'll put you on the list, and we are doing significant sidewalk repair every year. So,
But what's the wait? Because I remember in Los Angeles back in the days of 50-50, it was like a 75-year backlog. I mean, the streets were so dilapidated. There are so many repairs because apparently what I remember learning is that I think it was during the 50s, they were planting a certain tree that was just the wrong tree to plant.
That's
that
right.
there's certain trees that it's better to plant to avoid the sidewalk buckling.
Well, you know, there's a couple things going on. One is we're smarter than we were 50 years ago. There are certain trees which are beautiful and deserve to be in Central Park, but not in your parkway. They're just too big. So nowadays we're planting trees that make more sense. But in terms of how long do you wait, it really depends on how bad your sidewalk is. When I became a council member, I put a new program in place, really which is as simple as worst first. So for those sidewalks that are presenting a major public safety hazard, 3-4 inch displacements, we're going to get to that pretty quickly. Probably within a year.
And you're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I don't practice anymore. I would think
Smart lawyer.
Right. Well, there you have it. I would think it's a legal liability issue. I mean, if the sidewalk is buckled, I've tripped on that huge displacement, and what if I got hurt? Wouldn't it be the city's responsibility?
Well, that's right. And that's why some cities like Los Angeles have made the decision, you know what, it's just cheaper to pay the lawsuits than to do the work.
Really?
But I think that whether or not that's true, it's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is prevent the harm in the first place. You know, Brad, I was walking with a friend of mine who's in her late 70s, and we were actually working on sidewalk repairs and taking notes of which the worst sidewalks were in the neighborhood. And during this walk, she fell flat on her face on a 3-inch displaced sidewalk. Now, luckily, she was okay, but for some people, that could be a broken hip or even worse. So I think it's very important that we think of, it's not just an inconvenience for those who might be young and able-bodied, but for people in wheelchairs or the elderly, this can be a very life-altering situation.
Let's also talk about priorities, because as we know, the city of Los Angeles is facing a significant budget crisis. I think $25 million deficit over 3 years. And as a result, you're going to have to make cuts, and you're going to have to pick favorites. And sure, we want our sidewalks to be safe, but if we have a budget crisis in Long Beach, that means you're likely cutting from public safety. And if you're cutting from public safety, I don't care how much your sidewalks are in disrepair.
Right. Well, and I hear what you're saying. That's why the real conversation is, what are those core services?
What are they?
I believe that sidewalk repair should always be part of the mix of municipal services. So, you know, the problem is if you say, well, let's just stop doing sidewalk repair for 1 year and put that money into fire, or police, or parks, or libraries, guess what? It never comes back. And then you just stop doing sidewalk repair. And that's
you're
exactly what
saying
other places have done.
It should always be a line item. Even if it's cut some, don't eliminate it completely from the budget, because to get it back in,
Yeah, it's not going to happen. That's why I think it really is the conversation of what should our city government be doing, and I think it is a core thing. So yes, maybe it goes up or down, but it's always part of the budget.
Now, you're one of 7 council members. And 9 council members. See, there you have it. Each city is different. What do your fellow council members believe? Because, you know, if they don't have the same philosophy.
Well, you know, certainly every year we have a conversation about the budget, and I don't want to speak for all of them, but I will say overall, we have put at least $3 million in the budget every year for the last several years in sidewalk repair. And last year, we actually almost doubled that. And we were able to do that because of one-time funds from oil revenues. And I would say it's it's very prudent to take one-time funds on a one-time boost as opposed to putting in an ongoing project.
But let me ask you about Long Beach, because I know each city operates differently. Can you, in your councilmatic district, say, I want more funds spent for sidewalk repair? If Suja Lowenthal doesn't want that, that's fine. That's her choice. But in my district, I'm going to focus more on sidewalk repair. Do you have that latitude?
Typically, the answer is no. In most years, we help decide with the community which sidewalks are fixed, but we get a set amount of money for sidewalks. This last year is a little bit different. We did set aside some funds from the oil revenues because oil was so high last year.
But was it divided equally amongst 9 districts?
That extra money was divided equally among 9 districts and can only be used for street and sidewalk repair. So some districts might say we'll put more money to street work and more money to sidewalk, but it has to be done for basically those activities.
But you have that latitude to say more street work, more sidewalk repair.
In this last year we did, typically not, but last year we did.
What if, for example, there are some districts that have needs that are greater than others in terms of sidewalk repair? I have to think just certain parts of the city is older and hasn't seen the repairs. Is there latitude in that way to focus more in one area as opposed to the other?
Well, that's a good point. One size does not fit all. That's why with this money we have this last year, the oil money infrastructure, we can put it more into sidewalks, I think that's where the need is, or more into streets.
But what about specific areas of the city?
Right. Well, so what we do with our sidewalk money typically is we don't do it, I should say the street money, the sidewalk and street money overall, is we don't just give it exactly divide by 9.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
We look at 2 formulas. One is divide by 9 for half the money, and the other half of the money we do it based on needs. So some areas might have a lot of bad sidewalks. They do get a little bit more money than other areas.
So is that just for that 1 year that you were able to implement that formula, or is that something that's done consistently?
No, several years ago the council made a vote on basic infrastructure repair, and they decided to go from just dividing by 9 and having equity across the districts to taking half the money and making sure it's distributed equally, but the other half of the money focused on need. So if you live in a district with really bad infrastructure, you'll get a little bit more money.
How's your district specifically?
Well,
is yours amongst the better ones?
It's not the worst and it's not the best.
Okay.
We're pretty much in the middle of the pack.
What else are you looking toward in terms of infrastructure improvements? I believe we've spoken before about a park that you're looking to develop. I forget the name of it. It's on a hill.
Oh, California Gardens.
Yeah. How is that going for you?
Well, we're going to have a park preview on July 4th. So any of our viewers want to come out 4th of July. That'll be the highest point in the city. Watch the beautiful sunset, watch the Pacific Ocean. That's going to be the place to be. But we're going to open that up over time.
So here's the challenge, though. I mean, you want to spend money on parks, you want to spend money on sidewalk repair, you want to spend money on street improvements. Where is this money coming from with a deficit of $25 million over 3 years?
Well, and that's the issue. I think what we need to do is look across the board, cut out wasteful spending, but we're also going to have to, really make some tough reforms. One reason I've talked about pension reform is you might say, well, James, that might be kind of a wonky issue. Well, pension reform is about saving millions of dollars that we can put back into services like sidewalk repair.
So many cities, many counties have engaged in their own pension reform and have been successful. But at a certain level, do you need significant pension reform to come from the state level? Or can you do enough pension reform in the city to benefit the city itself?
I think the time to act is now. The city of Long Beach has already acted for our police and firefighters.
Do you have a 2-tier system now for new hires?
We do for police and firefighters, but not for the rest of city employees. So the job's, not fully done. We've made a lot of progress to their credit, but now we need to sit down, and we are sitting down with the regular employees saying, how can we move forward, provide these key services, be fair to you, but in a way that makes sense fiscally. We just can't have people retire at 50 years old anymore. It's just not feasible.
Well, that's a bold statement. I mean, there are plenty of people in the union movement who would be very angry to hear you say that.
Well, Brad, I think years ago, when people lived to 65 years old, that might make sense. But now with people living to 80, 90, and so forth, it has to change.
Okay, James Johnson, I want to thank you so much for joining us. His name is James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.